A young mother vanishes in broad daylight. Hours later, her car is found, unlocked, untouched, with her phone still inside. But the truth wasn't on the street. It was hidden behind the walls of her own home. And the man responsible? The one she called Dad. This is not just a murder. It's something far more disturbing. What kind of mind plans a killing, only to wait until the victim is dead before pressing record? It took 6 minutes to strip away the last illusions of humanity from a man once considered a quiet, unremarkable stepfather in suburban Pennsylvania. 6 minutes of footage, silent, methodical, horrifying, projected in a courtroom where even seasoned law professionals struggled to remain seated. Some jurors wept. One vomited. The judge paused the session. No amount of legal training could have prepared anyone in that room for what they were about to see. On the screen was the lifeless body of a young woman, naked, unmoving. She had been posed, manipulated, and defiled. The man behind the camera showed no signs of panic, no visible hesitation. There was a chilling deliberateness in how he positioned the lens, how he prepared the scene. This was not the aftermath of a crime of passion. This was a ritual, premeditated and executed with disturbing calm. The footage, recovered from a hard drive inside a modest home on the outskirts of Northampton County, captured the final desecration of Jessica Padgett, a 33-year-old mother of 3, recently married, beloved by co-workers, students, and family. She had vanished only days earlier after leaving her job at a local preschool. At the time, her disappearance triggered nothing more than concern. But within 72 hours, it evolved into one of the most repulsive cases of necrophilic homicide in recent American history. Before her name became a headline, Jessica lived a quiet life. She worked with children, maintained a warm home, and navigated the daily complexities of motherhood. Her wedding to Michael Padgett just months prior seemed to mark a new beginning. No one, not her husband, not her co-workers, not her children, suspected the danger was waiting not outside, but within her own family. On the afternoon of November 21st, 2014, Jessica left work early to send a fax from her mother's house, a seemingly mundane errand. She never returned. Hours passed, calls went unanswered, and eventually her husband contacted the police. Her white Subaru Outback was later found abandoned in a parking lot across from a convenience store. Her purse was still inside. So were her keys and cell phone. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no trace of violence, just stillness. The footage from a nearby security camera showed the vehicle arriving, but the figure who stepped out was not Jessica. This person was significantly taller, broader, a male. And that one detail shattered the assumption that Jessica had parked her own car. Investigators, measuring the height of the vehicle against the unknown figure, estimated a range between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet 3 inches. Jessica stood at 5 feet 4 inches. The initial theory, that she had been abducted by a stranger, began to unravel. The placement of the driver's seat, pushed forward as if adjusted for a smaller frame, seemed to be a deliberate attempt to mislead investigators. And the man with the right height, the right vehicle, and the opportunity was Gregory Graf, her 53-year-old stepfather. What police would eventually uncover was far beyond what any of them had anticipated. Inside Graf's home, under the guise of calm domesticity, they found signs of hurried cleaning, bleach, blood-stained napkins in the trash, a rug that had been scrubbed yet still carried a dark shadow under the fibers. A pair of blood-speckled shoes had been disposed of in a public dumpster. Graf had called a local waste company a day early, requesting pickup before the bin was full. And then there was the camera. In a locked room, behind his computer screen, investigators found the recording. It was time-stamped, it was methodical, and it revealed something even more sinister than murder. This was no ordinary homicide. This was a case of organized, sexually motivated necrophilia, a crime so rare in forensic criminology that only a few documented instances exist globally each decade. But in this case, the footage left no room for ambiguity. Gregory Graf did not kill Jessica in a fit of rage. He waited. He watched. And when she arrived to send that fax, unaware, unsuspecting, he executed a plan that had likely formed over weeks, if not months. Jessica never saw it coming. She was shot in the back of the head at close range. She was killed instantly before she could speak, scream, or even turn around. From there, Graf transported her body to his bedroom, where he had already prepared the camera and the setting. He positioned her like a prop, not a person. He pressed record. The silence in that room, broken only by the mechanical movement of the camera, echoed far louder than any scream. It was in that silence that the full weight of the crime became unbearable to those who later reviewed the footage. Jessica, in death, was denied dignity, and Gregory Graf, without hesitation, captured it all. He later buried her body in a shallow grave behind his home. When questioned, he lied. First, he claimed she had never arrived. Then he said she was already dead when he returned. Only when confronted with undeniable evidence did he begin to tell fragments of the truth. But the footage had already told the story, not just of what happened, but of who he truly was. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us a lot. Thank you. In the days before Jessica Padgett disappeared, nothing appeared out of place. She woke early, packed lunches for her children, drove them to school, and headed to work. Her life followed a pattern of care and quiet responsibility, the kind of rhythm that, to outsiders, speaks of safety. At the preschool where she worked, Jessica was respected, gentle, and consistent. Her recent marriage to Michael Padgett seemed to mark a new chapter in her life. But what no one saw, what no one could have imagined, was the predator waiting behind a familiar door. Gregory Graf was not a man who stood out. He ran a small landscaping business, owned a home in the suburbs, and had no prior criminal record. His demeanor was calm, almost too calm, and those who knew him would later describe him as reserved, private, a little distant. There were no obvious signs of violence, but from a criminological perspective, that absence of warning signs is not reassuring. It is often the mask of control, the calculated composure of a man who plans his deviance carefully and without error. He lived with Jessica's mother, Danelle, in a home just outside Northampton. On the day Jessica vanished, Danelle was out of town, and Gregory was alone. That single detail, his solitary presence, became the axis around which the entire case would turn. The timeline was tight. Jessica left work around midday to send a fax from her mother's house. Surveillance footage confirmed she passed the nearby gas station at exactly 12:56 p.m. 14 minutes later, her car was seen again, but this time it wasn't Jessica driving. The vehicle moved fast, navigating turns with a calculated urgency, bypassing traffic lights. And then it stopped. Well, not at her mother's house, not at work, but in a random parking lot. She was gone. What followed was a carefully orchestrated lie. Gregory claimed he hadn't seen her. Then he suggested she was already dead when he returned home. But police work is not based on stories. It is based on inconsistencies. And his story was filled with them. Investigators found a broken timeline. Gregory said he wasn't home, yet his cell phone placed him near the residence. He said he went to lunch, but the footage showed him driving past the gas station without stopping. Neighbors he claimed to have spoken with denied it. And most damning of all, the fax Jessica was supposed to send had, in fact, been transmitted from his house at the exact time she went missing. Inside the home, police found more than just deception. The floor had been bleached, but not enough. Blood traces clung to fibers. In the basement trash, crumpled napkins held red-brown stains. A pair of men's shoes, thrown away too hastily, tested positive for blood. His computer contained web history linking to adult content and shopping records that showed he had purchased sexual paraphernalia. the day before Jessica's murder. These weren't the actions of a man who panicked. These were the markers of ritual preparation. From a behavioral standpoint, Gregory Graf exhibited traits consistent with organized sexual homicide, deliberate planning, control over the victim, and a post-mortem enactment of a deeply embedded fantasy. In his world, Jessica was not a stepdaughter, not even a person. She was the object of a compulsion he had long suppressed. This kind of pathology is rare, but it is not unheard of. Within the field of forensic psychology, there are individuals who exhibit necrophilic tendencies, often masked under a guise of normalcy. Their fantasies are not chaotic. They are meticulous, rehearsed internally until the opportunity presents itself. In Graf's case, the opportunity came when Donnell left town. The house was empty. The victim was familiar. She trusted him. That trust was a weapon. It is essential to understand that Gregory did not act in the heat of a moment. He waited. And when Jessica arrived, alone, relaxed, unaware, he struck with precision. She was shot in the back of the head. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of struggle. She likely never knew what was happening. He didn't want resistance. He wanted silence. And when she collapsed to the floor, he began the part of the crime he had been planning in the shadows of his mind. Jessica's body was dragged to the bedroom. The sheets had already been turned down, the camera already prepared. This was not improvisation. This was execution. After the recording, Gregory cleaned what he could. Then he buried her in a shallow grave on his own property, steps from the house he shared with her mother. Days passed. He continued to play the role, picked up Donnell from the airport, offered words of comfort, helped search for Jessica as if he didn't already know where she lay. But under the weight of evidence, his lies began to collapse. His demeanor in interviews grew erratic, shifting from cooperative to vague, to suddenly defeated. When confronted with the facts, the video, the facts, the blood, he didn't lash out. He didn't cry. He simply stopped talking. Gregory Graf, by the time of his arrest, had already lost the ability to pretend. The mask had slipped, and beneath it was not just a murderer, but a man who had built an entire life around concealing the darkest corners of his desire. By the time Gregory Graf was formally charged, the public had already begun to reckon with the horror behind his facade. Media outlets described the crime as monstrous, depraved, inhuman. Yet none of those words could fully capture what had been done to Jessica Padgett. In legal terms, it was classified as homicide. But the truth was darker. This was not merely the ending of a life. It was a calculated violation that stretched beyond death, blurring the boundaries between murder and desecration, between impulse and ritual. As the trial approached, the prosecution faced a dilemma. The 6-minute video, the footage retrieved from Graf's hard drive, was the most powerful piece of evidence they had. But it was also so graphic, so grotesque, that even seasoned attorneys hesitated to submit it. Yet they had no choice. Gregory Graf pleaded not guilty. He offered no admission, no remorse. To ensure conviction, they had to show the jury the unfiltered truth. In court, the video was played in its entirety. Jurors were warned beforehand. Some covered their mouths, others turned pale. The silence in the courtroom was complete, broken only by the low mechanical hum of the playback. No one spoke, no one moved, and when it ended, there was nothing left to argue. What they had witnessed was not the act of a man who lost control. It was the realization of a fantasy, one that required domination, death, and stillness. Graf's defense team attempted to argue diminished capacity, suggesting mental instability or psychological duress. But the facts left no room for that narrative. He had planned the act. He had bought specific items in advance. He had moved the car, adjusted the seat, misled police, cleaned the scene, and carefully stored the evidence. Every step reflected awareness, intention, and anticipation of consequences. The judge, visibly shaken, called the crime unspeakable. In the end, the jury deliberated for just 6 minutes, the same amount of time as the video. They returned a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. Gregory Graf was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He offered no statement. He apologized, softly, but never said Jessica's name. Not once. The courtroom emptied slowly. The Padgett family stood in silence, too exhausted for outrage. Jessica's husband, Michael, described the aftermath not in terms of anger, but of absence. The absence of her laughter, her presence at dinner, her role as a mother. Her children were still too young to understand. Someday they would, and when that day came, they would learn that their mother died at the hands of a man she called Dad. But what remained, long after the sentencing, after the headlines faded, was the question of how. How a man could harbor such a fantasy, how he could live among others, smile, function, and still carry that darkness inside him. In criminal psychology, there are cases that defy conventional motive. Gregory Graf did not kill out of jealousy, revenge, or financial gain. He killed for control. Not just over Jessica's body, but over the narrative of who she was and how she would be remembered. By taking her life, he claimed her silence. And in doing so, he tried to transform her from a person into an object, one that belonged to him, even in death. But he failed, because Jessica's story endured, in court records, in public memory, in the sorrow of those who loved her. Her name outlived his violence. The case left a permanent scar on the community. It redefined what evil could look like. Not a monster lurking in the dark, but a man who held doors open for strangers, trimmed hedges on weekends, and kissed his wife goodbye before she left for Florida. When the mask finally fell, there was nothing underneath. No madness, no torment, just a void, cold, calculated, and inhuman.